I use Grid Edit just about every day to help me get my work done fast, but it took revealing its mysteries to realize the benefit. Welcome to Quickbase Junkie. I help Quickbase builders learn fast to deliver more. My gift to you is the ultimate Grid Edit Guidebook, where I share dozens of shortcuts, tips, and strategies for working with and in Grid Edit. In this video, I'll break down some of my favorites. Before we get started, I want you to know where you can get the ultimate Grid Edit Guidebook. Just head over to quickbasejunkie.com/Grid Edit. Okay, I'm here on a report and I'm gonna jump into Grid Edit mode because that is what this is all about, revealing those mysteries. When we're in Grid Edit, you might already know that you can click on essentially what you could consider a cell, almost like working in Microsoft Excel. So we've got columns, we've got rows, and we've got cells. But did you know that you can click on these columns and even right-click on the columns to reveal hidden menus? This is also true for our rows. If I click in this white space over here, sometimes it's a little hard to get to, but you can select an entire row and then right-click in that space and reveal the hidden menu. This allows you to insert rows, delete entire records, go in and edit the record as well as display the record. Whatever you need to do, it gives you a super quick, easy shortcut, but it's really kind of hidden if you don't know it's there. All right, so that is shortcut tip number 1. The next one I wanted to share you is a way to really enter data quickly or make updates or changes quickly. Let's say the name of this project isn't this one. I want to associate this with a different project. We'll just choose this new project here. Once I click on the cell, I can drag down and select multiple additional cells. I can hold that Shift key as well and select. And now using my keyboard and the Control D or Command D if you're using a Mac, I can fill down. Simply with that little click of the button, that shortcut, keyboard shortcut, I can fill down whatever I need to and change all of those records all at once. Let's see that again. Let's say I want to move all of these same ones into planning. I just simply choose the first, drag down or hold down that Shift key and then hit Command D or Control D depending on what type of system you're using. So it updated those records that changed, left those that were already in planning and planning. That is an awesome shortcut. I use Control D all the time. You can even do it when you're adding new records. So for example, you need to add a brand new record or you just want to jump to the end of the report. Click this new task or new record, whatever your records are called, up here on the top left, and it will jump me to the very bottom of my report where I can add new records. I can't even tell you how long it took me till I actually pressed that button because I thought it would pop up a new window and, let me enter a new record, not take me to the bottom of my report. It's a super, super quick shortcut just to get to the bottom of your report. And again, even if you're adding new records, we can fill these down using that Control D and it will extend to new rows, which will create new records for you. All right, I don't actually want those new records, so I'll delete those. Now, I want to show you something that is like a really super, super hidden menu. I don't even know how I found this. It was by sheer luck and clicking around that I found it, but I'm so glad that I did. I'll tell you, what I used to do, you'd get into a report like this and think, oh gosh, is this the report I wanted to change? Or I'll see something and I want to get into the record itself to make the update or to view what's on the full entire record or the full form. But if I click on view here, it's going to say, I'm going to leave the page. I'm going to go somewhere else. You're going to lose all your changes. And I'm like, that's not what I want. Well, what if I wanted to edit the record? Same thing. It tries to take me away from this page, which is not what I want. Even right-clicking on these, I can't right-click and get them to open in a new window. Here's where the magic comes in. If I highlight the whole record, remember we're going to just regular click in this white space off to the left of the row or record that I want to choose. I'm going to right click, and you'll see again the option to edit this task and the option to display this task. If I click on these directly, it's going to do the exact same thing as clicking on the pencil or the eyeball. But if I instead right click, it's going to give me the option to open in a new window. Right click again, open in a new window. If I click this, it will open a new tab with that record in either edit or display mode, whichever I've selected. And then I can see or do what I need to do without losing my place in Grid Edit. I love this shortcut, and it's really super, super hidden. I mean, really, who right clicks after they've right clicked on another menu? It's just crazy. I had no idea it was there, and I'm so happy I get to share this with you. Now, these are just a few of the shortcuts that are included in that Ultimate Grid Edit Guidebook. I've got 2 pages entirely devoted to shortcuts for working in Grid Edit. But for now, we're going to move on to another section in the guidebook, which is all about optimizing. How do we optimize the way that we use Grid Edit throughout Quickbase to make sure that we are taking advantage of this wonderful feature, this sort of Excel-like data entry feature in more places than just one? To do that, we're going to go ahead and get out of this report. Don't need to save those changes. Okay, so what I want to look at now is a parent record. We want to look at embedded forms. You're probably already familiar with embedded forms. This is where we're going to show child records on a parent form. So our parent in this particular app is projects with a child of tasks. So if I scroll down, I can see that I've got the list of tasks embedded on that parent form. These are called embedded reports. Pretty standard thing. But what I can't do when I go and edit the record is to easily also edit, wait for that to load, edit the child records while I'm on the parent. Say the entire project needs to shift, right? I'm going to update that parent record with the new start date, and I want to modify all of those child records at the same time. I can't do that without going into edit, 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 or possibly using the grid edit here, but this takes me away from the parent. It's going to re-navigate, open the report in grid edit mode here on almost like another window, and it's navigating me away from that report. I'm just going to go back. So instead, what would be super easy and super fast would be if I could modify this in that grid edit way without having to do any other steps. So let's see how we do that. I'll simply jump into customize this form, find where I have that report. This is my embedded for projects report, and I'm going to click this little box here that makes it editable. Editable means just that. I will be able to edit it so long as the overall form is in edit mode. I'll click save. And now, because I am in edit mode, right, I can edit items here on the form. I've got this in grid edit mode. I can immediately come in here, make changes. I can use all those same Control D shortcuts that I had before, clicking here, choosing items from the menu. I'll show you another quick one. If I choose multiples, right click and insert blank rows, it'll insert just that many blank rows where I can add additional records. Even if you had no child records here, if you had this embedded form, you could add records, brand new, very first children records to the parent using this editable version of the embedded report on the parent form. You can also use a entirely made for grid edit type report, a report made from scratch as a grid edit report, and you can embed that on a form as well. Awesome, awesome tips. that we have for optimizing data entry in the Ultimate Grid Edit Guidebook. I only showed you really just one here, but I want to keep going because there's so much in that guidebook that I want you to see and I want to demonstrate for you. So I'm going to move on to the next section, which is really around form rules. Sometimes we can get really tripped up with form rules because form rules will only apply to the form that has the rules. Does that make sense? So if I look at this form, let's just take a peek at this form. On the form itself, I've got multiple required fields. Now these are only required on the form. They hadn't been required on the fields themselves, just as part of the form. But you go, gosh, I want to make sure that these are required. But when using Grid Edit, it bypasses these form settings as well as any form rules if I had form rules. So how do we make sure that even when users are using Grid Edit, that they still maintain that integrity that we have on our forms with the settings and rules? We get out of this. So normally when I do Grid Edit here, you'll notice that there's no requirements. I can enter a new project with just, a couple of fields selected, and it will allow that to happen. It'll create a brand new record and it has no name and no other critical information that I need it to have. So how do we make sure that we're still complying with those requirements? To do that, I'm going to need to access the secret or semi-secret menu where I can choose how I want Grid Edit to work. I'll show you where that's at. We're going to jump into our settings and into our forms. This is the last place I would have looked for Grid Edit settings, but it's here in the forms. Now, when I only have one form, you don't get to unlock these additional options. But as soon as I add a new form, I'm just going to click OK and save. I literally just need a second form that allows me now to unlock additional features. So now I've got two new menus, one to set how different roles use these forms and another to override role settings by report. Amazing. Just by adding that additional form, I now have these options. When I open this, I get to see all the roles that I have in this particular application. And if I scroll over to the right, I can see Grid Edit. Grid Edit is listed here with standard behavior, but if I choose instead my project form, if that was my original form, where those required fields were set. If I choose that form here under Grid Edit, let's see what happens. I'm going to exit the settings, and now I'm going to go into Grid Edit. Now, two things have happened here. Well, one, it's already giving me a warning. There are required values on this page that are blank. It wants to make sure I fill those out. But not only does it tell me that I've got required fields that are blank, it's showing what's required, but it's also displaying all of the fields that are on the form in the same order that the form has them. So this can be quite useful even if you don't have required fields. So now, of course, all these records, it's saying there's an error here, there's an error here. I don't know, that even looks like a little squashed bug to me, that it wants me to fill all of these things out because I said that they were required on the form, and then I chose that form in those settings. Wowza. Getting access to those additional menus makes all the difference, and we simply added another form in order to do that. This is one way that you can be sure to add those requirements for any required fields. But what about other things? What about if you have other form rules for what happens after the record is saved, or that show and hide different rules? I get into all of this You guessed it, in the Ultimate Grid Edit Guide. Head over to quickbasejunkie.com/grid edit to get your copy of the guide for even more tips. And one in particular, I've got a whole other video I've recently created, and that is on custom data validation. That is a way to write your own sort of checks and balances that work not only on your forms, but also while using Grid Edit. Check it out. Okay. One last section that I want to make sure to cover because it is super important. This last section is all around managing access. Who gets access to Grid Edit? And when do you need to cut off that access to Grid Edit? We're going to go ahead and jump out of this. I don't want to mess with all these rules. So I'll hit cancel. Now, one of the main ways that they'll teach you how to control access to Grid Edit is through the overall app's roles. So I'm going to jump into the main app settings and take a look at my roles. Jump into this team member and over to user interface. All right, you can see I've already got this checked, the hide multi-record options for all of my tables. Now, there's a bit of a warning here. This will remove the option to use Grid Edit, but it also affects other multi-record options. So you want to be cautious here because it includes things like search and replace as well as import. So you're really forcing all of those multi-record options to be disabled across the entire table, or in this case, across the entire application for that role. You want to get more precision with whether or not certain tables or forms or reports are able to be added to or modified from Grid Edit. We can do that with the settings we were looking at before on the table for the forms. So I'm jumping to my projects table here and back to forms. And again, because we added that second form, we get these additional menus where we can override role settings by report. So I can get laser focused on how Grid Edit works by report. So depending on my role settings, right? If I've disabled multi-record actions for the role, this won't have a lot of effect, but if it is enabled for that particular role, then I can set up how it works for a specific report. I can even disable it. I can say, you know what? I do not want people editing this specific report with Grid Edit. I want to disable it because I want to force them through those form rules. I've got awesome form rules that really do a lot of good. I want to make sure that they're not overriding that by using this report. Similarly, you can choose, as we did before, the various forms and have it implement the form settings. It still will not implement those form rules, unfortunately, but the settings as well as which fields and what order those fields are in, or like I said, you could just disable it altogether. If we go up here into how different roles use the reports, we can do it by role. Again, getting more laser focused as opposed to removing all of those multi-record actions across the board. This is where you do it. Last thing I want to say is overriding these settings. If you have a report that was created in Grid Edit mode, the report itself is not a table report, it's not a chart, it is a Grid Edit report from the get-go, they'll be able to use it no matter what the settings because that is a Grid Edit report. Similarly, if you set up one of those embedded reports and you've made it editable, they will still be able to edit using that editable report. Those things override any of these settings, so that way you can still have your cake and eat it too, disable them from using any other Grid Edit reports, and maybe allow them to only use some that you've specifically chosen. I've enjoyed sharing all of these tips with you, but there are so many more in the Ultimate Grid Edit Guidebook. So head over, if you haven't already, to quickbasejunkie.com/grid edit. Get your copy of that guidebook for even more shortcuts, tips, and strategies that will really allow you to get the most out of Grid Edit. You will be so happy you did, and you will never use Grid Edit the same. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and subscribe using the link below. You can also drop me a comment and let me know what you thought and what you enjoyed the most. And then head over to QuickbaseJunkie.com to grab one of those free downloads. Bye for now. Using the link below. Bye for now.